Hello, everybody. I am Patty Dorito, and I am the founder and owner of Holistic Healing Atlanta. Holistic Healing Atlanta is a place where we address the physical through nutrition, exercise, and sleep, the emotional, why we do what we do, and addressing any trauma, as well as the spiritual of each person. Each person is unique so that each protocol that we use is specific to them so that they can fully heal. I found personally that by incorporating all three of these aspects into my life, I feel much better and I'm a better person. If you happen to have any questions during this show, you can post them into the chat box to your right. And if you are listening to this at a later time, feel free to contact me or my guest, Dr. Sansa Curtis. So in conventional medicine, the connection between diet and mood is barely, if ever, mentioned. Depression and anxiety are seen as a disease of the brain to be treated with a pharmaceutical, focusing on addressing the neurotransmitters such as dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. The success rate of these drugs is way less than you would expect. And personally, I, a long time ago, were on probably like 50 or 60 different ones of these and never got any benefit, which is kind of why I do what I do. But if you ask any conventionally trained doctor how much nutritional training they got in medical school, the answer is somewhere between very little and none. Even GI doctors don't seem to connect food to the GI problem. So it seems like there's a pill for every ill, and that's the mindset of the doctors and the pharmaceutical reps. So why should I watch what I eat if I could just have a pill to fix the problem? Seems to be how lots of people think. In my own practice, I have seen depressed, anxious, suicidal clients even get better with just addressing diet, and it's pretty phenomenal. So tonight we're going to talk about food and mood. How does diet affect how we feel? Are there foods that we should avoid? What are the good foods? If you're sick and tired of not getting the answers to your health issues, maybe it's time to look into a functional medicine. So I have a very special guest tonight, Dr. Sansa Curtis. She graduated from the University of Nebraska Medical Center Physician Assistant Program in 1996. After a decade of practicing, she pursued her doctorate in naturopathy from Clayton College of Natural Medicine in 2010. She was certified in functional medicine in 2014 through the Institute of Functional Medicine. She founded 3D Wellness here in Atlanta in 2014 with the intention on focusing on holistic and integrative medicine. From a very young age, Dr. Sansa Curtis had a firm belief in the power to heal the body of chronic illness. Natural remedies were introduced to her through her grandma, who was a midwife and an herbalist. She was further inspired by her experiencing living in Germany. She is a busy mother of 4 and a grandmother of 4, serving in her community and going on medical mission trips globally. So please welcome Dr. Sansa Curtis.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for coming.
I'm so excited to be here.
So my first question to you, Dr. Sansa, is why did after a decade of you being a physician assistant move into the functional medicine world?
Well, as I was practicing, people were coming in and I was doing ENT and they wanted to take antibiotics. And I'm like, you don't have to take antibiotics for every time you have a sniffle. So, and I was just tired of just, like you said earlier, giving a pill for an ill, and nobody wanted to take responsibility for their own health. So then I start searching and searching, and this isn't what I got into medicine for. I got into help people, not to aid people, to give them a pill, and then they just get worse, and just they never got better. Well, they did with medicine and surgery. So I was looking for something more of a natural aspect. So I started doing some research and started going to the various different conferences. And I decided I was going to go back to become a naturopath. And when I went back to become a naturopath, I was with one of the pioneers in functional medicine, Dr. Christine Gustafsson, and I sit down with her And I said, so what should I do? Should I do the Andrew Weil or should I do functional medicine? She said, by hands down, do functional medicine. There's nothing wrong with Andrew Weil. She said, but I think you would get more out of it. So then it was there that I began all the dots, connect. When you're a little kid, you have that, you draw and you begin to send the whole big picture. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what my life is all about. So that was pretty interesting. And just this evidence-based medicine. And I was able to finish up my naturopath and combine all three trainings to become, that's how we got 3D Wellness.
Very, very cool. Just for our audience, what is the difference between like a Western medicine trained doctor and a functional medicine doctor or provider?
Well, you kind of hinted on it earlier. One of the difference of functional medicine, we get to the root cause. So we do a systematic approach. So we look for inflammation. So we don't look at your headache as being, okay, you see a neurologist. Your headache could be coming from something that you're eating. Your headache can be coming from, other neurological aspects of things, or you're toxic because you have heavy metal toxicity. You might have mold. So we look for the root cause, and where Western medicine, they just everything has a diagnosis. Matter of fact, that's how they get paid. You have to have, if you don't code right, you can't get paid. So it's all about making a diagnosis and just to label you. And don't get me wrong, I think Western medicine is great for acute medicine. But where they fail is when they try to treat chronic issues. They don't have a good basis for chronic issues and getting to the root cause.
Yeah, I kind of liken getting to the root causes. I might have a leak right above me in my ceiling, but that doesn't mean in the roof right above is where the leak is coming from. It could be way on the whole other side of the house, but it just kind of comes downstream, and the leak is the sort of the symptom. So, like you said, the symptom is a headache, but what is it? What's underneath that? So, yeah. So, anyway, so how do you see, Dr. Curtis, food and mood related?
Oh, good thing you asked. I always, it's interesting. I work with you as well, and then I work with a psychiatrist, and it's interesting because, you are what you eat, and you perform what you absorb. So the gut is the epicenter for everything. So if you have a leaky gut, you can also have a leaky brain because it crosses the blood-brain barrier with such certain foods that you shouldn't eat. So it's all connected. So you have 9 pathways from the brain to the gut, but you have one pathway you have 9 pathways from the gut to the brain and one pathway from the gut from the brain to the gut. Okay, got that right. Okay, I'm gonna repeat that. So 9 pathways from the gut to the brain, one pathway from the brain to the gut. So it's ever circling, but what you eat affects your mood.
Okay.
And I'll give you a prime example. How many of you guys have caffeine? And you get caffeine when you're jacked up on caffeine. So if you already have anxiety or heaven forbid hot flashes, then it makes it worse. And so there's the other foods that can mess up your mood.
Yeah. Can you explain what a leaky gut is or a leaky brain? Because
okay.
I know what that is. You know what that is, but we want to make sure that other people understand when we refer to leaky gut is.
The best way I have to explain leaky gut is when imagine having a cup and you're having some tea and you have hot water, right? So if the tea bag is intact, you put it in the cup of hot water, you have a nice, good cup of tea. If there's a hole in that cup, in that tea bag, you're going to get all the nasty stuff that's going to get in the tea. So, it's going to get in your cup. So you're not going to like your tea. So that's the tea bag represents the integrity of or the lining, the gut lining. So when that is disrupted by food, stress, hormones, toxins, food allergies, autoimmune issues, and it can like punch holes in that gut barrier. So we have over 10 trillion bacteria in our gut. It's all about keeping it balanced. So I do an analogy. I mean, I show my patients that you have these linings that line the gut lining. So I mean, at each cell. So you have enterocytes. So the top of the enterocytes, I call that the bounty picker upper. That's where all the absorption happens. And this is a factory. This is where everything is broken down, and then it goes straight into the bloodstream. So generally, you have this tight juncture that helps add to that barrier. So when any of those things we listed above kind of sits on these microvilli, then that opens those gates. And once those gates are open, now food particle can go straight into the bloodstream. When that happens, that is not a friendly situation. That's a foe. It's a foreigner. And so your body doesn't recognize that. So it's like trying to attack that. And that starts the whole inflammatory cascade, inflammation, which everything that happens in the gut does not stay in the gut. So if certain foods are leaky gut, you can have joint issues, you can have headaches, you can have ADHD, anxiety, depression, fatigue. That's my biggest one. People come in and just fatigue, and I'm like, you have gut issues. Rheumatoid arthritis, thyroid issues, diarrhea, constipation, and everybody's probably saying, oh yeah, I got one of those. Usually when I do that circle, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like all 5 or 4 of those or whatever. So, what happens in the gut can affect your whole entire body. And it's about keeping that balance and removing those foods that are causing that irritation. And I say heal and seal the gut. Many times people come and they want to do food allergies or food testing. I'm like, let's work on, like you said, you're not going to fix the leak. You're not going to patch the hole where it's leaking. You're going to go to the root cause of it, and that's generally the gut. And then you come back and repair the other.
So if somebody came to you, Dr. Sanzo, where do you start looking, like, so obviously they have a leaky gut. What do you do for that leaky gut for a patient?
I will mess up your food. Your food, I call it diet, but I always tell people diet to me denotes a start and a finish, and it's not a start and a finish, it's a lifestyle. The first 3 letters in diet is what? Die. Okay, so I hate the word diet. It's more of a lifestyle. And then once your gut is healed, I believe in the 80-20 rule. So the 80-20 rule, 80% of the time you're going to eat, on the gut healing program. And then the 20%, you're going to have anniversaries, you're going to have birthdays, you may go on a cruise, not now, but you may go on a cruise one day. You're going to have, death in the family. So those things is, I always tell people you give them a pass. So I do the 5R gut restoration program, and I remove the most offensive foods. And those are gluten, dairy, and sugar are my top 3. And if you have autoimmune, I take soy and corn out as well, because those are the most inflammatory foods. Studies have been shown on those foods. Some people take out eggs, but at that point, if I tell you to take out everything, people will go running for the door and they wouldn't come back, Patty. So I have to meet them where they're at. But generally, by taking just those few foods out, and then and then we give them digestive enzymes, and then probiotic, and a gut healing powder with glutamine, aloe, okra. Those things are kind of soothing. So they're like, putting lotion on your skin. It's just going to help heal the gut and seal the gut there. So you do that for a minimum of 21 days. It takes a minimum of 21 days to turn over new gut flora. And it takes 21 days to kind of create a habit. So generally by then, sometimes people mess up and they say, oh man, that gluten did it. Or that dairy was I didn't think my dairy was the issue, but that dairy, I can't eat dairy anymore. And that process, I have learned, it teaches people how to tap into your innate ability, basically to listen to your own body. And I think that's what we've, as we get older, we don't hear what our body is saying. When we were younger, we had butterflies. Now we just go push that, we have to do things yesterday and we don't listen to our body. And then I focus on stress management. That is huge. I mean, I have women come in here and they're saying, are you stressed? No, I'm not stressed. You're a single parent, you're working, you're going to school, you just moved to Atlanta. Yeah, you're not stressed. And then they look at me like, oh my God, I guess I really am stressed. So we always see stress as being a negative. The stress can also be positive. You're having a baby or, moving, a new job, a new position. And I know you see this all the time where people don't recognize, oh, I don't have stress. What are you talking about? That's my other friend, not me, So then we work on, stress management. Now, for me, I'm not a licensed counselor, so I start with gratitude and then I send them to you. Okay. So I find that, yoga, mindfulness and meditation, I'm just going to be real with you. When I first started this journey, I would be sitting there like, okay, did I call Patty? Did I put my clothes in the dryer? I just couldn't get there. But I found when I started practicing gratitude on a regular basis, I could sit there for hours. And so I have patients now as an exercise, 3 things that you're grateful for in the morning. And you want to meditate on those for 5 minutes. 3 things in the evening that you're grateful for, and you meditate on those for 5 minutes. The act of gratitude alone increases dopamine, decreases inflammation. And the only thing it takes is time. So you wake up on the right side and you go to bed on the right side.
Yeah, I mean, if I could get everybody to do that, and I'm going to add journaling. Journaling it gets it down your arm onto a piece of paper. But there's 2 types of people in the world, journalers and not journalers, and trying to get the non-journalers to see the value of it, or even gratitude. Some people say, well, I don't have anything to be thankful for. And I'm like, well, did you wake up this morning? Did you walk up the steps to see me? And just trying to get them to start looking at the positive rather than the negative. But that's spot on.
Yeah. Well, you say find journaling. Journaling gives me, I think we've talked about this before, it makes me hyperventilate because my mother would always take oh, so you like Bobby now? She would always read my journals. So, and all my diaries, it wasn't journals back in those days, it was diaries. So for me, the journaling was a little bit harder to do. So I actually do video journey. I mean, so I'll talk into my phone, and I find that to be another sense of relief instead of writing things down. So I'm getting there.
Well, again, if you've been traumatized because somebody butted in and opened your journal, your private journal, and I do have people that are like that, where husbands or children or parents or siblings, and they're like, I'm not. I said, well, write it down and rip it up and burn it, to have no evidence. But that's great too, to what you're doing. That's fine because you're getting it out of your head.
Yeah.
Then
I exercise, because exercise is key. So it increases brain BDNF. So that's brain. Oh gosh, I just started brain neuron. I'll come back to that. Hold on, it'll come back to me. But basically, it increases your endorphins, and so sometimes I have to stop people from exercising too much because they take it too far, and it causes adrenal issues. But exercise is key, and sitting is a new smoking. So now what do we do? Oh my God, especially now, I have Zoom butt. So that's all we do, from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom to Zoom. So it's interesting. Right now, I have even some of my patients, which I'm incorporating. I'm going to get those standing desks, and so where I can come up and down, because just sitting on a regular basis is really, it's hard to try to get that movement in place. So
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I also think that one of the things that people with their food is that food's really changed over the last 50 to 70 years. So what the nutrients used to be, say in an orange, is so much less today than it was 50 years ago. You know, in the ground, it's been sort of raped of all of its nutrients and things. So you're not getting the minerals and the vitamins from things. So I don't know. What do you think about supplementation?
in our day and time, supplementation is key. You can never get all your supplements from from your food. I get mine from the butcher. I go to the farmer's market, but even still, there's still a depletion. And when I measure patients, their nutrients, you'd be surprised of the different nutrient deficiency. And another thing you said about medication, medication, depletes. Everybody's on some type of medication. So medication within itself depletes of nutrients that you're trying to put back in the body. So it's almost like, you have you're spending and you're putting money in and you're taking money out at the same time. So it's hard to kind of keep that balance. So when you're taking a lot of medications, that's depleting you as well. And the ground, like you said, I remember my grandmother, they lived by the farmer's almanac, and if they would till the ground, and then they would let the ground rest, and then they would plant at another spot. But now if we have factory farming and we have industrialization, and I think in the 70s, they thought, oh, we've eradicated disease. When I was a kid, it was very rare to see somebody with diabetes or even overweight. But now even kids, elementary kids are, most of them are overweight. I don't know the stats, but they're overweight because what do? They eat junk food, all processed food all day long.
And sit on their butts watching screens. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so what does happen when junk is the fuel? What does that do to the body?
Well, now we live to eat instead of eat to live, so we put all kind of things into the body. I have an analogy with that. Some people pay more attention to what they put in their car than what they put in their body. You wouldn't put water in your gas tank, so why would you put junk in your body? So Hippocrates said, "Let thy food be thy medicine," but now we're letting food be our poison because of everything that's put in the food. The genetically modified, like you said earlier, how wheat is so genetically modified. Even our grains is genetically modified. And then we put that in our body and we expect our body to just do what it normally does, and it doesn't. And so it's amazing when you just change a person's lifestyle and change their food and how they eat. They're like, oh my God. It's like, just taking all the bad stuff out, all the processed food, and eating real food.
Yes. I have a client and I tell him he is my poster boy for mood and food. So he was suicidal and he had good reason. He had the means and he had the reasons why he wanted to kill himself. So he said, well, do you think I should get on Prozac? Well, I said, you can do what you want to do, but personally, I said, and I just because it was easy, he's a guy. I said, look up Whole30 diet and follow that for 30 days. So after 2 weeks, he was feeling really good. And by 3 weeks, he was almost back to himself. 4 weeks, not only did he feel back to himself, his knees stopped hurting and he'd wake up and his sinuses weren't. And that's just eating that real food, because the Whole30 basically is eating meats, vegetables, nuts. And so you're cutting out carbs, alcohol, dairy, sugar. That's a real, I mean, you can look it up, and I think that's just spectacular, because he just recovered so quickly, faster than, I mean, because Prozac takes 2 to 6 weeks if it's going to work. So,
Yes.
yeah. So I want to put him up with my poster boy. So how about COVID? I mean, we're living in a really tough time. So we have not only COVID, the pandemic, we have the elections coming, we have all the racial ick, we have all the hate groups and the violence and all that stuff. How do you see that in your practice affecting people's anxiety and depression, and then even what they're eating or drinking?
Well, one of the things is, especially this time with all this stress, if a person has an underlying substance abuse or they're trying to quit an addiction, this has increased, that's just gone out the window. And the stress level is a whole different level, because now, not only even in my own house, I watch my grandson, and he's doing virtual learning, and it's totally different, and these kids aren't going out there, not socializing now with other kids. And they're sitting there going to school, sitting at the computer. After they can finish school, then they're playing video games, and they're becoming zombies. And then now you have parents that are, they didn't go to school to be a teacher. Now they're forced to be a teacher. My daughter said one day, I went from being a mom to a teacher, counselor, lunch lady, all in one, overnight, when it all happened. And, sometimes you just can't, deal with that. And just your hormones are off, and even in the food. So when COVID first came out, I told people to social distance from the amount of the news that they listen to. Because if you listen to all of that, that penetrates your DNA, your tissue, and you're doomed if you listen to that stuff. And then you have to social distance yourself from the refrigerator because you have nothing else to do. So if we're going to practice social distancing, let's make it work for us, okay? And the types of food, because you can't go to the store every day. You can't get fresh. I used to go to the store 2 or 3 times, a day if I was cooking. So you can't go to the store. So now you're forced to even get stuff that's going to last longer. So you don't want to be exposed. So now more packaged foods, more processed foods are coming back into the house. And it just becomes, the vicious cycle. So, I tell people, like, get it frozen or go to the farmer's market. And I know you can remember this. My grandmother used to can or, freeze stuff. So, you can still buy fresh and frozen, but it's almost, you have to retrain yourself how to do things. We're into this have it your way Burger King society. We can have everything our way that we don't want to do. It takes a lot of work to do what our grandparents did, taking those, picking the beans, or now we just got to go to the farmer's market and get them and then bag them and put them in the freezer. So that's the biggest thing that I've seen is just when the food change and, with the mood, and it's brain derived necrotic factor. That's what my BDNF. Sorry, I told you it would come back to me.
So I also see people where they're reaching for food because they want to comfort themselves, or they're craving salt, or they're craving sugar. But I say there's a reason why they're doing that. And besides for just the comfort, they want to go back to the food that maybe when they were a little kid, it just tasted good and mommy was there, or whatever. But, I think too that sometimes sugar gives a boost of dopamine and serotonin. So it's going to help us feel better. Instead of saying like what's going on? What am I craving and why am I craving? And say, oh, I need a boost of the dopamine and serotonin. So what are some other ways I can get that besides with food? And do you tell your patients something like what to do to boost naturally their serotonin or their dopamine?
Grounding is one. I have them go outside and do grounding. Again, exercise.
Tell them what grounding is.
Becoming one with the earth. So I have you go take your shoes off or go sit on your lawn or whatever, and just absorb through skin to ground, and just sit there for a while, and you can absorb that. You'll get some minerals from the dirt, but it's just naturally will calm you down. Also, breathing. Soft belly breathing, having people breathe where you breathe in. Have them put their hands on their belly. And when they breathe out, their belly should go out. Their shoulders shouldn't go up. Their belly should go out. And then as they inhale, inhale should go out. Exhale should go in. So I have them breathe out a count of 8, hold it, count of 4, breathe out, count of 8. Do that a couple of times. If yoga, meditation, that's another one. Guided imagery is another one that I have them do. And if you're not, like I said, exercising, if you're not going too crazy with it, exercising is one. And sometimes it's just getting back to the basics. And now it's just like mindful eating. Now that everybody's home, sit down at the table and eat together as a family. What a concept, Even that, and putting phones, putting the electronics away, because that blue light will definitely, mess with your pineal gland and have everything kind of just off. And somebody had a question like, what advice would you have for picky eaters? Picky eaters, I find even with my grandson, incorporate them into like eating, cooking the meal, make it fun. And my granddaughter was like, oh, I'm not going to try that. And I'm like, just give it a little bit of try, and each try it just a little bit. And then she found out she liked it. So if they just kind of kids, I find if you just keep playing with them, or, eventually they'll get it. And if they don't like carrots, I saw this one thing where they had this, like, it was like a clown face with all the different veggies and fruits and all that, and incorporating them with stuff like that. And that's great for picky eaters.
Going back to helping boost the dopamine, I saw, and I don't have the link to it, but there's a 31-day appreciation, and it starts tomorrow for 31 days, and each day you do an act of kindness. And that's going to not like I signed up for it. I'm like, oh, I'm excited, because when you do something for someone else, it feels good. And that's a little boost of dopamine that you're doing an act of kindness. So, yeah. So, do you recommend a best diet for somebody? Someone's like, because you have the ketogenic, you have the intermittent fasting, you have the Mediterranean. What do you like?
If I would say overall, the Mediterranean is my favorite, because that kind of, has the most studied research. Keto is there, but keto goes in and out. I've seen people, I'm just not a fan of somebody eating all that fat. I think we have to have balance as much as we can. Keto is great for, patients with seizures, diabetes, and because it burns. But I just don't like people to stay on keto all the time. Sometimes I'll take patients through keto, and then they cycle through Mediterranean, then they go back through keto and Mediterranean. So I don't think there's a one size fit all. I think it depends on the individual. My biggest thing that I preach is lifestyle. Because if I tell you to eat this, that, and the other, and you don't like it because you're a picky eater, then you're not going to do it. So it's like, well, what is your lifestyle? If you're taking your kid and your baseball and all that, it's making better choices. By you making better choices, then you're going to start to feel better. And as you start to feel better, then you're not going to want to reach for the salty foods and the caffeine, or even, the alcohol, those type of things. So.
Yeah. I just recently, one of the things I do is I work with genetics and in the holistic methylation, and Dr. Jay Dunn just came up with this program based on your genetics, like what kind of food you should be eating. So I actually, based on my genetics, it'll say how I metabolize fat, not very well. How do I metabolize carbs? Not very well. And how well do the proteins break down to amino acids? And this is just genetically. It's not saying how it expresses, but it gives me a good idea of where to start based on just me. And I think again, like you said, sort of like the Mediterranean diet is going to be. I just thought that was really interesting. So. So we have a couple questions here. So what does it mean when you crave sweets or salty foods?
It's usually adrenal issues, sweet and salty. Sweets can also be candida because you're feeding the monster within. But it also, again, if you're depressed, they did a study where they showed that cocaine and sugar, it would light up the same part of the brain. So they find when a lot of people, they're alcoholics, they become sugarholics because it's that same euphoria with the sugar. So sugar can be a comfort food, or it can be meaning candida, or you could have what we call small intestinal bowel overgrowth. And that's where you have an overgrowth of bacteria that's growing in your small intestines, and it's hard to get rid of. So you have to, whether it's a digestive issue or, killing the bacteria that's in there all at the same time. And the salt cravings, oh my God, do I know that very well. I can wake up in the morning when my adrenals are off, and I could eat potato chips. They were healthy, okay? That's what I thought. Or I could eat pickles. I went to eat pickles, and so those things. So salt is generally adrenals. That's just kind of as a rule, but honestly, you really need a good workup because it could mean more than that. So I hate to give general, but that's generally what it means.
So how do you test for adrenal problems or candida or SIBO, the small intestinal bacteria overgrowth? How do you run tests? What do you do?
The SIBO test, I do a breath test. I use Genova Diagnostics, Aero Diagnostics.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of breathe in this apparatus and you do a baseline. And then you take this lactulose, which basically is sugar, and then you measure 20, 30 minutes. So what you're doing, you're measuring the sugar as it's going through your small intestines. And if it's an increase or rise, that means that that sugar that you just consumed is giving, so it should be higher. It's higher than it should be because it's feeding the sugar that's in that the bacteria that's in that small intestines. So we look for hydrogen or methane or hydrogen are the two. So that makes a difference. One of them, don't correct me. One of them is you see common with constipation, and sometimes you see one with diarrhea. I can't remember which is which, but you see that. And then also stool tests. Stool tests kind of tells me whether there's parasites, whether there's overgrowth of bacteria, whether also the degree of leaky gut that there is, if there's any. We have what we call, like I said, we have over 1 trillion of bacteria, so it's about keeping them balanced. Those are overgrowth. Candida, you can also see that in the poop.
Do you use the GI map? That's the one I use.
I use GI map, and I did a conference this past week, and they were telling me it's some others, microbiome labs that does the bacteria. They do the probiotics. They have one. Vibrant America, they have one. IBGARD or IBS, and it's interesting. There is another. I thought about that when you were talking about the DNA testing for what you can eat. There's another test, day 2. So day 2 looks at your stool and your microbiome and to kind of see what food pairing would work for even diabetics. And they found that was good. So maybe apple was okay because it's low on the glycemic index. That might not be fine eating it alone, but an apple and a piece of salami, not salami, a piece of meat may pair together, and now you're in an excellent range. So that was pretty interesting. Yeah. So there's so many things on the gut microbiome. They're looking at, you can determine by the bacteria, the different types of bacteria that can predict like autoimmune disorders in the gut. So it's just fascinating. the new studies that they're doing just with gut. But yeah, I use GI Map, and there's a one, I think it's Fiori, that you send the stool in and they will actually make a probiotic based on that specimen. So they
That is
customize probiotics.
very cool. Yeah, I love the personalized medicine that's coming down the pike too, specific to each one of us is just very cool. There's another question here. Is it important to eat 3 times a day or every few hours? I have my opinion. I don't know what you think.
Again, it all depends. If you're doing intermittent fasting, it's more getting the amount of your basic metabolic rate. So again, you wouldn't go from Roswell to Athens on a quarter tank of gas. So you have to make sure you put enough food and fuel in you, and how you eat it. You have the intermittent fasting where you have the 12, and and then they have the 16, and then and you can go up on that. So I know that was old school, but it's all individually. I drink a lot of my morning. I drink a shake to get my calories. So you can drink a smoothie to get your calories. So it all depends on you, and even if Ayurvedic, what dorsi you are, because sometimes smoothie may not work for you. You might have to eat your veggies raw. So, but as a general rule of thumb, you should be eating at least 2 meals a day, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So like my last thing for you is like, if somebody wants to work with you, is that they're like sick and tired of being sick and tired, and maybe the doctor is saying, sweetheart, maybe just put you on antidepressant because and I have a lot of people that come to me because that has happened. I'm sure you get a lot of people. What can they expect? Where do you start? What, especially with
Yeah. Well, first of all, we start with my patients. We start with a free 15-minute consult to kind of see if we're a fit. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a firm believer that every doctor isn't for everybody. So that is the first key to healing, to make sure you and the practitioner are on one accord. Because you have to work. It's a partnership. So we partner together, and I don't shoot on anybody. So if I have people who say I can only take away gluten, okay, we'll start with gluten. We have to. I meet you where you're at. Mm-hmm. And then after the 15-minute consult, if you decide you still want to work with me, then we do an hour. I do go to a meeting because of COVID, but I used to bring patients in the office where we do an hour visit on virtually, and then we have you come into the office to do your blood draw and your physical exam, and then pretty much it's pretty virtually after that. But I run my initial battery of wellness assessment, and I put patients. I just found that if you start with the gut, I don't really have blood work, so I start with the 5-hour gut restoration program. So by starting with that, you come back 3 weeks, look at your results, we do a follow-up. And I tell you, when people come back in 3 weeks, they're amazed at their change of symptoms already. They're like, oh my God, I feel better. I've lost weight. It's just amazing. And sometimes I have to stop and ask myself, like, who did you see? I mean, sometimes people come in and they're really like, as I would say, tore up from the floor up. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I can even work with you. And they come back and just changing up. Just lifestyle, they notice a difference. But then when I get the blood work back, then that's when we dive in and we really begin it personal, because, you may have an issue with magnesium, or you may have an issue with copper, you may have an issue with SIBO. So then at that point, that's when we get to the deep personalization, because I have some data to go with. I treat patients, I don't treat labs. So if I see your lab and your lab doesn't look fit for what's going on, then we may hold off on it. So it's a combination, I think I'm an intuitive person, and, and I work with you from that perspective. Like I had one lady came in and she had a cold. I know she had a sinus infection or something, or lung, and she went to go see her primary care. He put her on steroids. Well, I looked at her labs and her blood sugar was crazy elevated. And I'm like, you know what? I said, what happened? And she said, "Oh yeah, I went to because I had my lung issue. You put me on steroids." And I'm like, "Okay, well, because I've looked at your labs before and it wasn't an issue." So we waited, where some doctors would have jumped and said, "Oh, you have diabetes. We need to treat you right away." But I didn't. So I just told her from that point on, we would just watch it. But and that's kind of how I treat patients. And then I develop a relationship with my patients. Um, One lady called it best. She said I felt like I was just an auntie of hers, giving her advice. And sometimes even I have to tell patients, it's like, okay, what are you doing for yourself? Sometimes I feel like, you have to be a mom or a sister to people because they just don't realize what's going on. And then I have a team approach of people. I don't try to be a cardiologist. I don't try to be a counselor. I don't try to be a psychiatrist. I have a team of people that I work with. I send patients to Patty and some patient psychiatrists. I have my whole network of people that I work with because it takes a village to heal a person.
Well, I just think that's awesome that you're actually listening to it, the people, and like I've been to doctors where their back is to you and they're typing in data into their laptop while you're talking, and like they don't touch you, they don't really look at you, and it's very impersonal. So I love that personal touch, even though it's through Zoom, a lot of it, but it's still very personal, which, thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
The world needs people like you.
Thank you.
So anyway, if you have any questions, you can either reach out to me or Dr. Sansa, and her information is there. Before we end, I also want to mention, and I don't know the name of the book, that Dr. Sansa Curtis wrote a chapter in a book. What is the book?
No More Band-Aids 2.0.
I love it. Oh, there you are. There's a picture of you on it.
Yeah, I got my picture on it. So it was a great experience, and the book the authors are amazing. It goes from pain to hormones to essential oils to working out. As a nutritionist, she talks about diet. Her sons had seizures, so it's a good roadmap just for anybody looking for just want to dive into what integrative natural medicine remedies that are available. So it's a good book.
So thank you for listening in, and I'm going to say goodnight, except for next week on Tuesday at 7 p.m. So the 20th, I have it's the 3 prongs of wellness. What does the soul have to do with it? So I have a priest coming, Dr. Michael Bremer. So we often address the mind and the body, but a lot of times in health, we forget the soul. So, what is the relationship between the body, the mind, and the soul? And where do we concretely start if we've been wounded by a church, or we're rusty, or have never incorporated prayer into your life? Anyway, so thank you again, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.